In the eastern dustlands of Burkina Faso, where silence can be deadlier than gunfire, a convoy begins to move. It isn't just the rumble of engines that breaks the stillness, but the promise stitched into each rotation of its wheels: no village will be left behind. On October 12, 2025, over 100 trucks laden with sacks of rice, jerry cans of fuel, cartons of vaccines rolled cautiously along the Bogandé Manni road. Escorting them was a military force forged not in parades, but in Peril Battalion of Rapid Intervention 19, known simply as BIR 19. At their head, a commander known only by his code name, Captain Lynx. This was no ordinary mission. This was survival on wheels. The corridor they traveled is more than a route. It is eastern Burkina Faso's last remaining artery. Other highways had been lost to insurgents or seasonal floods. The stakes were brutal in towns like Tambaga and Ogaru. A single 50-kilo sack of rice now cost as much as 150,000 CFA, over $240. For families trapped by isolation, survival meant boiling tree leaves and praying for rain or a convoy. BIR 19 moved not just cargo, but history. Each mile forward was a victory against ambushes, IEDs, and sabotage. Ahead of them, 5 hidden explosive devices were detected and disabled by sappers from the Military Engineering Corps. Drones scanned treetops and roadside ditches. Volunteer defense fighters, ordinary farmers turned soldiers, guarded the flanks with their rusted rifles and sharpened will. The structure was deliberate. Armored vehicles led the front and secured the rear. Inside the convoy, the center was sacred medicine, grain, water life itself. Soldiers took turns eating in shifts, sleeping in trucks, and standing watch through the dark nights. At any moment, the road could turn to fire, but they kept moving. Captain Lynx, known among his men for his silence and precision, radioed just once during the mission. "We are the artery," he said. "If we stop, the country bleeds." The convoy's progress was slow but steady, deliberate in its defiance. And when they finally reached Manni after days of tense travel, the reception was biblical. Women wept, children clapped, elders bowed in the dust. For many, this was not just a delivery, it was a resurrection. And in the eyes of the people, the soldiers of BIR 19 were not just fighters, they were messengers of life. State broadcaster RTB captured the moment in slow frames, mud-covered boots, tired eyes, but unwavering hands unloading cartons of medical supplies. One anchor said it best: they didn't just carry food, they carried the heartbeat of a nation. The symbolism was unmistakable. In a country written off by many international observers as ungovernable, this convoy carved a new narrative through the dust that Burkina Faso, against all odds, could defend itself, feed its people, and reach its forgotten towns not with foreign troops, but with its own sons. But this was not a miracle. It was strategy. BIR 19 is part of a broader military doctrine under President IbrahimTraore, a shift from reaction to resilience, from dependency to indigenous defense. The convoy on the Bogandé Manni route was not just a logistical maneuver, it was a declaration that the state had not vanished, a declaration that sovereignty is not just a word on paper, but a road secured, a child fed, a convoy returned. And for Captain Lynx and his men, there was no glory in this mission, only necessity. "We are not heroes." One BIR soldier reportedly said, "We are the last line before silence. In the Sahel, where roads often lead nowhere, this convoy meant everything. It was slow, it was dangerous, but it arrived. And in Burkina Faso today, arrival is everything." The success of the Bogandé Manni convoy wasn't just about soldiers and supplies, it was about strategy. And at the center of that strategy stood one-man President IbrahimTraore. When Traoré came to power in 2022, Burkina Faso was hemorrhaging territory, trust, and time. Foreign military partnerships had grown stale. Rural provinces were falling to insurgents, and the people, especially in the east, were losing faith in the state. What Traoré offered was not just a change in leadership, but a change in doctrine. His philosophy was blunt and revolutionary. Burkina Faso will not outsource its survival. This mantra has shaped every military and political decision since. It gave birth to the Rapid Intervention Battalions, BIRs, a new generation of mobile, fearless, and locally embedded military units designed to reclaim territory, reconnect with citizens, and prove that national defense could come from within. BIR 19, the unit that led the October 2025 convoy, is one of 28 such battalions established under Traoré's command. Each is tailored for rapid deployment in volatile zones, trained not only in combat but also in civil-military cooperation. They sleep in their vehicles. They eat what locals eat. And when they march, it is not for parade, it is for presence. For Traoré, sovereignty isn't a speech. It's a soldier knocking on a villager's door with a bag of rice and a box of medicine. But military reform was just one layer of a broader recalibration. In 2024, Burkina Faso joined with Mali and Niger to form the Alliance of Sahel States, AES, a political and military union of 3 post-coup governments that shared a common vision: regional sovereignty, self-defense, and strategic independence from Western powers. By early 2025, the AES had announced the creation of a joint force of 5,000 soldiers, an army not trained in Paris or Washington, but in Ouagadougou, Bamako, and Niamey. This force was designed not only to push back extremists, but to challenge a decades-long narrative that Africa's security could only be guaranteed from abroad. Under Traoré, Burkina Faso's security posture has shifted from reactive to proactive. Instead of waiting for attacks, his forces move into red zones with precision and purpose. Instead of relying on foreign logistics, they build internal supply lines, even if that means escorting their own convoys across mined roads. And the results are being felt. The Bogandé Manni operation is a case in point, with no international assistance. BIR 19 executed a mission that involved months of planning, coordination with local defense groups, VDPs, intelligence gathering through aerial reconnaissance, and logistical management on a scale unseen in recent years. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't clean, but it worked. And for Traoré, that's enough. He understands that leadership in a failing state isn't about charisma or policy papers. It's about sending real men into real danger with real results. His style is unapologetically raw, leading from the front, sleeping in barracks, walking the same muddy roads his soldiers tread. In press conferences, he's austere. In the field, he's omnipresent. This grounded leadership has resonated in a country long used to distant politicians. In villages like Tambaga and Komanjari, elders now speak his name with the same reverence once reserved for liberation fighters. For them, he is not just a president, he is the man who remembered they existed. Of course, critics abound. Western analysts warn of authoritarian drift, press suppression, and alliance shifts toward Russia. But for many inside Burkina Faso, those criticisms ring hollow. After years of being told what to do, whom to trust, and when to act, the country has chosen its own path, even if it's a harder one. Traoré's doctrine isn't perfect. It is evolving, often under fire, both literal and diplomatic. But its core is clear: Burkina Faso must stand, walk, and, if necessary, fight alone, not out of pride, but out of necessity. The Bogandé Manni convoy was more than a humanitarian escort. It was a moving piece of that doctrine, a living vehicle of national intent. As one soldier from BIR 19 put it, we carry food, yes, but we also carry his vision. And in a region where visions often vanish into dust, that may be the most valuable cargo of all. While BIR 19 was navigating mines and ambushes on the road to Manni, Another battle was unfolding, far from the dust and danger, a battle over narrative. Western media outlets have long painted a grim portrait of Burkina Faso under President IbrahimTraore. Reports from organizations like Human Rights Watch and outlets such as Euronews, The Guardian, and France 24 have accused his administration of suppressing press freedom, drifting toward authoritarianism, and deploying military force with little regard for civilian lives. In March 2025, a report alleged that government-backed fighters had killed over 100 civilians in the Silenzo region, many of them ethnic Fulani. The international headlines were swift and damning. Terms like militia state, rogue regime, and Africa's next pariah filled op-eds and analysis pieces. And as the October convoy moved toward Manni, several Western observers dismissed it as little more than military theater designed to bolster Traoré's domestic image. But on the ground, the truth looked very different. In Tambaga and Ugaru, mothers cried not out of fear, but relief. In Bogandé, old men raised flags sewn from bed sheets. On local radio stations, children recited poems to the soldiers who brought back the sound of life. It was not theater, it was testimony. State media, particularly the national broadcaster RTB, captured these moments not with bombast, but with solemnity. Their coverage of the convoy was slow, deliberate, and emotionally grounded. No flashy graphics, no heroic music, just raw footage of soldiers unloading supplies, wiping sweat from their brows, and hugging children too malnourished to stand. RTB's anchors used phrases like the artery of hope and a declaration of existence. One segment showed a teenage VDP volunteer guarding a checkpoint with nothing but a wooden spear. Another lingered on a soldier, disinfecting a wound in silence, his hands trembling. These weren't propaganda shots, they were moments of intimate struggle and service. President Traoré himself has been vocal in his rejection of Western portrayals. In a fiery address earlier this year, he stated they only spend their time lying, but the youth of Africa is no longer deceived. He accused foreign media of perpetuating a narrative designed to delegitimize African efforts at sovereignty, of turning every success into suspicion. And there is historical weight to his claim. For decades, African nations have been framed through a lens of dependency, needing rescue, requiring supervision, incapable of standing alone. The Bogandé Manni operation, carried out without a single foreign troop, challenges that lens. It dares to say, we did it ourselves, and we did it better. Of course, not all criticism is unfounded. There are legitimate concerns about human rights, freedom of speech, and regional stability. But what is often missing in Western coverage is nuance, the recognition that nations like Burkina Faso are not choosing oppression, but survival, that they are not resisting democracy, but domination. In this media war, truth is not always about facts, it's about framing. And in that framing, RTB has offered a powerful counter-narrative, not by shouting louder, but by showing deeper, by turning the camera toward the overlooked, the weeping mother, the muddy boot, the trembling hand. They invite viewers not just to witness, but to understand. For many Burkinabe citizens, especially in the East, RTB's broadcasts have become more than news. They are lifelines. In villages without electricity, elders gather around radios. Children are taught to sing the convoy's arrival like a national hymn. And across markets and mosques, one phrase echoes louder than the bombs: we are not alone. The Bogandé Manni convoy was not just a logistics mission. It was a cinematic rebellion against erasure. And as dust settles over that long, perilous road, one truth remains in Burkina Faso. The fight for sovereignty is not only waged with guns, but with stories. And in that battle, every image, every voice, every slow-motion frame becomes an act of resistance. Beyond the armored vehicles and drone surveillance, beyond the tactical maps and press briefings, lies the most powerful impact of the Bogandé Manni convoy. It made people feel seen again. In the eastern provinces of Burkina Faso, Nagna, Komonjari, Tapoa, and beyond, entire communities had been cut off for months. Insurgents had destroyed roads, blockaded access points, and turned villages into ghost towns. Schools were shuttered, clinics emptied, mothers buried children not from bullets, but from hunger and untreated fever. To live in these regions was to live in a kind of national shadow, a place where government had become a rumor, and the outside world a fading memory. Until BIR 19 arrived, when the first truck of the convoy rolled into Manni, carrying flour and penicillin, fuel and hope. The emotional impact was immediate. In Ugaru, a woman named Mariam fell to her knees, clutching a sack of millet. "We thought we had been forgotten," she whispered, "but then they came. Real soldiers, and they knew our names." This is the power of presence. Military strategy is often judged by its technical success number of enemy positions neutralized, territory secured, logistics completed. But Traore's doctrine measures another metric: dignity restored. For him, victory is not just defeating insurgents. It's reviving the social contract between state and citizen. It's about letting a child in Komanjari feel just as valued as one in the capital, and in a region long dismissed by global headlines as hopeless. That's nothing short of radical. Every sack of rice unloaded by BIR 19 became a symbol of that contract. Every handshake, every shared meal, every smile exchanged between soldiers and civilians sent a message: you still matter. And it wasn't just the military that delivered this message. Alongside BIR 19 were the VDP's volunteers for the defense of the homeland. These were not career soldiers. They were farmers, teachers, shopkeepers who had picked up arms to protect their own communities. Poorly equipped, but deeply committed, they walked beside the convoy, slept in tents, and helped distribute supplies. "We are not heroes," one VDP volunteer said. "We are just villagers who love our village." President Traoré had elevated these volunteers to national defenders, giving them training, recognition, and most importantly, trust. His message to them was simple: you are not invisible anymore. In doing so, he expanded the idea of national defense not as something reserved for elites in uniform, but as a collective effort that flows from the ground up. This bottom-up approach has transformed how many Burkinabe citizens view their government, no longer as a distant authority, but as something human, responsive, and near. And in a country where state failure has often felt more certain than state support, that transformation is profound. The emotional scenes from the convoy's arrival speak volumes. Children running barefoot alongside trucks, smiling for the first time in weeks. Elders offering water and songs to exhausted soldiers. Teenagers posting photos online, captioned simply, "They came." These are not PR stunts. These are spontaneous affirmations of connection, belonging, and rebirth. And yet, the symbolism doesn't end there. By executing such a mission without foreign troops, without UN peacekeepers, and without aid agency direction, Burkina Faso didn't just deliver supplies, it delivered proof. Proof that it could act, decide, and protect on its own terms. In doing so, it challenged the long-standing idea that Africa must be saved from the outside. It flipped the script. This isn't to say the mission was perfect, or that deeper structural issues don't remain. They do. But for once, the people of eastern Burkina Faso didn't have to beg for aid. They received it from their own brothers in arms. That matters, because in the end, sovereignty is not a speech. It's not a flag. It's a convoy that arrives on time, a mother who feeds her child, a village that sees its name on a supply manifest, and perhaps, most of all, it's the quiet conviction that no matter how remote, how risky, or how forgotten a place might be, someone is still coming. That's the strategy Traoré is betting on. And for the first time in a long time, it's working. The convoy that traveled from Bogandé to Manni was more than a line of trucks. It was a line in the sand, It marked the boundary between abandonment and assertion, between a past defined by dependency and a future carved by defiance. With each mile, BIR 19 didn't just carry food or medicine. They carried a message: Burkina Faso has not disappeared. It has returned. And at the center of that return stands President IbrahimTraore. His leadership has never been about ceremony. It has been about consequence. Where others see dust, he sees direction. Where others offer words, he sends warriors. Through his doctrine of sovereignty and practice, Traoré has redefined what it means to govern in a nation under siege, not from a palace, but from within the peril. Critics call him reckless. Supporters call him necessary. But even his detractors can't ignore what is happening. A country once dismissed as ungovernable is now guarding its roads, feeding its people, and restoring its sense of self without foreign boots or borrowed scripts. The Bogandé Manni mission is a blueprint, not just for Burkina Faso, but for all nations seeking to reclaim their narrative. It shows that sovereignty is not gifted, it is earned, kilometer by kilometer, against fear, fatigue, and the easy temptation to wait for help that never comes. BR 19 earned it. They earned it in sweat-soaked uniforms, in shattered bridges crossed, in minds disarmed, and in mothers who now sleep knowing their children have food. Leadership, in the end, is not about avoiding fire, it's about walking through it. And in a world where many still wait to be saved, Burkina Faso chose instead to move, to act, to arrive. So let this convoy be remembered, not only for the distance it traveled, but for the truth it delivered: sovereignty lives where sacrifice begins. And in that truth, Burkina Faso is not only surviving, it is leading. If you believe stories like these deserve to be heard, share this video. Comment your thoughts. Add your voice to the convoy, because history isn't just written in capitals. Sometimes it's written in dust.